Now this is a seminar that I've done many times a long time ago, and it's basically a broad look at understanding breeding. And it's really about how ecosystems create and shape species of fish, and about how species of fish can actually create and shape ecosystems, and how the earth and the species that live on the earth are so parallelly related, a lot more than some people may understand. So basically natural selection. So breeding creates and shapes our world. Breeding creates evolution through natural selection. Evolution creates our world as a snapshot. The behavior of animals shape ecosystems. Ecosystems shape the behavior of the animals. The available ecosystems create new species. Breeding affects available food. Available food affects species distribution. Everything always changes. Nothing remains unchanged. Nothing remains the same. So what we have here is a little graph. So number of individuals with a certain phenotype, and it will basically show, and that little graph sort of shows you how a particular environment or food source or whatever can favor a certain characteristic, such as size. So then over time, the average, for example, size of the species can change. So if the environment favors a larger fish, then the average fish will over time evolve to be larger, just by that particular gene which is favored coming into dominance. So therefore the offspring are likely to be larger because the environment or the food availability or the mate recognition is going to potentially favor the larger fish. Just as species can get smaller, species can also get larger, and so forth. Every characteristic is open for change, and all the species are just a snapshot of evolution, because species do change and are changing. And a lot of species will change a lot faster than you think. Now this is basically just an example of how species can create ecosystems. So next to coral reefs are whole beds of coral sand, and it is pretty much understood that these beds of coral sand are pretty much created by these humphead wrasse. And they live in huge schools, and they move around the coral reef and just chomp all the reef apart. And I've read before that the whole Australian aquarium industry will remove less corals than will be chomped by one single school of parrotfish in a year. And there's many schools of parrotfish. And this is a natural, healthy phenomenon that goes on inside a coral reef. Now the coral sand that is created by these humphead wrasse create new species of fish, and these new species of fish will be able to utilize this new environment in order to thrive, and a lot of other symbiotic relationships will occur, such as the gobies will create relationships with things like shrimp, and may also progress or influence the evolution of the shrimp. Now these new species that are created by these new environments also attract new predators. So it's very possible that a whole new species of fish will actually evolve to feed on this whole new species of fish or invertebrate that may have evolved to take advantage of this whole new ecosystem that may have been created by another species of fish. Now those predatory fish that evolve to feed on the new fish that have evolved to live in the new ecosystem created by another species also can attract larger predators, just as those larger predators can attract larger predators. And there are many cases where larger predatory fish evolve to specialize in feeding on the larger predators that feed on the original fish that evolved for this new ecosystem. Now, humans have very little understanding of the coral reef. Now, a good example of that was the crown of thorns starfish. Now, sort of 15 years ago, the world was falling apart because the crown of thorns starfish was running around destroying the Great Barrier Reef, and millions of dollars were pumped into the solution of how to cure the Great Barrier Reef of the crown of thorns starfish. But basically nothing that people did made any impact whatsoever on the crown of thorns starfish. Then studies that have gone in 5 years after the crown of thorns starfish went away on their own and actually found that the environment or the isolated areas wiped out by the crown of thorns starfish 5 years later were actually healthier, better, more diverse than the areas that were not hit by the crown of thorns starfish. So just as an onlooker might look at a bushfire in the Australian bush and think, oh, the bushfires just destroyed the whole bush. But once again, when the studies occur 5 years later, that bush that was hit by the bushfire 5 years ago and decimated it, the bushfire has now rebound and is healthier, more diverse, and better than the environment which was never hit by the bushfire. So there's a lot about species and evolution and so forth that humans really don't have a clue about, but we're learning. So evolution